The second's the retirement age, which is one of the things that was done in '83. The retirement age is growing a little bit more each year.
People are living longer,
and
so
living
raise
longer.
the retirement.
Right. And I don't know how far you can go with that. There are some jobs that people have, manual labor jobs, where you say, well, put it in another couple of years. That's a big ask for someone who's 65 years old, and it may not be reasonable, so we can't go too far in that. But then there's a cost of living adjustments and how you calculate them for those who are in upper income categories. Terry, I can't tell you how many people who I know who are retired who say to me, you know, I'm almost embarrassed to get that Social Security check each month. I don't need it, and I still get it.
I was going to say, we have sometimes maybe a young family man who's making $30,000 a year paying a Social Security check that Ross Perot. There's only so many millionaires, but there are millions of millionaires.
Exactly.
Should we means test, or one idea that was presented as we have a minimum wage, what if we set in a minimum retirement wage, and then use Social Security as a stopgap? If your company pension is $800 a month, maybe you get $250 a month from Social Security.
I think we should look at it. I'm not going to sign on to the idea, but I'm not going to sign off on anything at this point. I mean, any reasonable approach to this to get the job done puts everything on the table and comes up with a reasonable package to make sure that future generations can say Social Security is going to be there. If you can't be sure of your savings and you can't be sure of your pension, for goodness sake, you got to be sure of Social Security.
In talking, I mean, you're the number 2 man in the Senate. You have a very good feel of the collective mindset up there. How big of an issue is this in the minds of the Congress?
Well, Social Security is relatively easy compared to Medicare. Medicare is huge, and it's about to go bankrupt in 4 or 5 years. Social Security, I've sat down with some very conservative Republican senators, and we have talked about how it would work. And I don't think it is a huge leap. I think we can take care of Social Security. I am confident that this program has such broad-based public support and is so important for the retirement of Americans, we can get this done.
Before we get too much out of time, one of the things that's going on right now is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA. Right. If you can quickly give us an overview, and one of the things the White House wanted is immunity for telecom firms. As I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, what they want to be able to, because America is a huge hub, a telecommunications hub for the world, someone who may be, let's say, a terrorist in France talking to another terrorist in Pakistan, their communications could be routed through the United States. The White House wants the ability to listen in on some of those conversations, to put it loosely, but tell us from your perspective, what are the issues, what are the problems that you have with the bill?
There are a number of issues here. First, you've described it. We want to be able to listen in on telephone communications and other communications of people who might be dangerous to the United States. We want our intelligence gathering to stop a 9/11 before it occurs, and everybody signs up for that. If it's a communication between 2 foreigners that goes through the United States, this isn't very controversial. We think that that obviously is a target that we should consider on a reasonable basis and use the technology we have. Now, what if that conversation is between someone in the Middle East and someone in the Middle West of the United States? Well, now we've got a little different concern here. There's an American citizen involved here. And add to this a second part. When you go and buy your telephone service with your cell telephone, whatever your company happens to be, they are bound by a law currently which protects your identity and your conversations. They have said under law that they will not let people without legal authority listen to my conversation or your conversation. And in this circumstance, the government came to these telephone companies and said, we want to listen to these telephone conversations. The telephone company turned around and said, by what authority? And the president gave them a letter, which I've seen. It's a very brief letter, about 3 pages long, and said, by this authority. The request was made just weeks after 9/11. People were scared, and they had a right to be, and we didn't want another attack. And so the telephone company said, we go along. We'll cooperate with you. You can listen into these conversations of our customers. We won't tell our customers this, obviously, but you can go ahead and do it. Time passes. Pretty soon you're in the second and third year after 9/11, and it still continues. And there are those who are arguing, the telephone companies at some point, really had to ask the government, by what authority are you continuing to listen into our customers' conversations? And that's what the lawsuits are all about. The president has said there should be no lawsuits. We shouldn't test this question in court. We should thank the telephone companies and keep about our business. And we're trying to find a reasonable way to protect innocent Americans and their conversations and their privacy, and to say, telephone companies, if you did this with proper legal authority, you did the right thing. And that's what the debate comes down to.
Did they do, in your mind, did the telecommunications companies have the legal authority if they had this letter from the president?
I will tell you that I thought initially, in light of the 9/11 emergency, they did the right and patriotic thing. I think over time that their legal departments should have said, wait a minute, we need a law that says you have the authority to do this. Understand, while this was going on, it was all secret. Nobody knew anything about it. It was only when it was disclosed in the newspapers and made it to the courts that the courts said, you know, our government doesn't have the authority to do this. It has no statutory authority to listen into these kinds of conversations. They should have come to Congress for a law.
What of the argument that, taking just what as you said, should the onus be on the telecommunications companies if they were acting in good faith for the protection of the United States? Should they not be granted immunity?
Well, that's a question. Certainly they should be to some extent. And the question is how much and whether that was the proper authority demonstrated by the government. That's what the lawsuit's about.
Senator, we're just about out of time. As we close out and you look forward to this year, what are we going to see that else is coming up on your radar screen as a number 2 man on the congressional agenda?
I want to dramatically expand broadband access in this state, particularly in downstate areas that don't have it. We're going to dramatically expand Amtrak service to the state if we can pass a capital bill in Springfield. We're working to make sure that this highway bill comes in for an investment in our infrastructure around our state. There are a lot of things that are on the horizon that will build our economy for good paying jobs. If there's ever a time when we ought to focus on putting people back to work, not exporting jobs overseas, and creating an infrastructure in Illinois that will attract good businesses that can make a good profit and pay people a good wage, this is it.
There are 1,000 other issues we could talk about. I wish we could, but we're out of time, and I appreciate you coming in to talk about what we have. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Terry.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois. If you have any comments or questions on our programming, please email us at illinoischannel@aol.com. Or if you have any questions about the Illinois Channel, please visit our website at www.illinoischannel.org.